the different provisions. Last night, we had some conversations post committee, and we came to an agreement around some of the financial decisions around the fraud software for Min-State, and also the trees in Bemidji, as well as, so I'm going to break it down a little bit. The A17 will be for the fraud prevention software funding, and then $5,000 for the trees. And then the A19 will be the $570,000 that's for the workforce development portion. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, so, and the $1.5 million from the general fund for, and that's going to be covering the FIG shortfall. So we're going to continue with the $570K from the FIG shortfall, and we're pulling $1.5 million from the fraud prevention software. And I think that was the agreement we came, and I appreciate our House counterparts for working with us to make that happen as well. And so if are there any discussions before we move the amendments? Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, it would be my commitment as we come back into the next biennium, Lord willing that we're all back here on the same committees, to fully fund Min-State, since we are taking some money from their second year to do the IT projects. And so I just want to publicly say that I think that's a high priority and that we should absolutely make them whole when we come back into the next biennium.
Thank you so much, Chair, for your comments. Are there any other members that will have any comments? Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I echo that. It is very important that we deal with this ghost fraud problem. And so I obviously support the decisions that we've made, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this will be an ongoing expense. And I think the $1.5 million versus the savings that will generate is well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Robbins. Are there any other members that would like to chime in? Seeing none, Representative Coulter moves the A17 amendments. Are there any discussions? Do members have it in front of them? Good. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. We'll now move on to the A19. Do members have the A19 in front of them? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Oh, sorry. Senator Umar Babayan moves the A19 amendment. Any discussion? Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would just point out to the public that are watching that we are taking funds from the Workforce Development Fund, which we don't typically have jurisdiction over, but because there's an agreement with our leadership that we will be taking money. And I did, just want to have that quick conversation to realize that workforce development funds are not in our jurisdiction, but there is an agreement. And so in my opinion, I actually had served on that committee in the past a few times. My husband is also on that committee here in the Senate. So workforce development funds are incredibly important. And this nexus for me is taking the workforce development funds and actually training the next workforce. So if we're going to be putting that money into fostering independence grants to help foster kids who have been wards of the state and don't have any other means in order to go to school, we're going to be training them up for the next workforce. So for me, this is a great nexus, but I would point out that that isn't typically something that the Higher Ed Committee does, but we do have the authority to do it because we've made an agreement. But I just want to get that on the record. And of course, we fully support the Fostering Independent Grant Program because it is just the most amazing program for these kids, and they wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Rarick. Representative Wolgamott. Representative Coulter.
That happens a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just sort of wanted to take a page and say that, I'm planning to be on the committee again next year, but I do hope next year we can come back and fully support fostering independence grants by fully funding fostering independence grants. These are, as Representative Rarick said, the foster kids are all of our kids, and I think we have an obligation to make sure they're as successful as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Coulter. Chair Wolgamott, did you also have a comment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I reiterate the comments of my House colleagues.
Thank you, Chair Wolgamott. With that, Senator Umar Bain moves the A19 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Next up, we're going to go to Senator Umar Bain with the A12 amendment. Senator Umar Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Okay. This is the amendment that we discussed yesterday. It's regarding the section on pregnant parenting students. There was a request to just kind of clarify the leave policy that applies to students, and then ensure that some of the requirements for the institutions applies to both our public and private institutions. All the parties have agreed to this language. So I would move the A12 amendment.
Senator Umar Bain moves the A12 amendment. Are there any other comments from members? Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we just double check to make sure with our stakeholders if there is any concern about the language? I just want to make double, triple sure that this is the correct language that they are looking for so that it accomplishes what they asked.
Are there any members from the public that would like to come up to testify? Or a thumbs up?
It looks like we have a thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Chair. Any other comments or questions from members? Seeing none, Senator Umar Bain moves the A12 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Sorry, the mic was off. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Next up, we have the A15 amendment. Senator Umar Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also had some discussion yesterday about the statewide attainment goal. There's some really great changes that were made to this process I would like to retain, but there was also conversation committee about concerns that moving to 75% was too high, with the previous goal being at 70%. So in having some conversations with my colleagues in the other body, wanted to bring forward an amendment to change that attainment goal to 70%. And I'm hoping that will be welcomed by the House.
Thank you so much for working on that, Senator Umar Bain. Are there any questions or comments from members? Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Verbatim. We appreciate the dialogue, and we strongly support continuing the attainment goal. And I just think that keeping it where it is until we can more achieve that goal and then reach higher is our hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. Chair Eric.
Thank you. So a little bit broader than what the amendment does, I thought this would be a good place to bring it up. So we did a little looking because Chair Robbins was concerned about cost, and so we looked at a fiscal note for Children, Youth, and Families Department agency, which we don't have jurisdiction over, right? So it's a $60,000 in this year, and then $58,000 and $58,000 in each year after, and then continuing on. So it's basically half of an FTE. And I would caution that unless we have an agreement from that jurisdiction, that committee in the House and Senate, that they would, and the agency, quite frankly, that they would either pay for it or absorb that cost. And I haven't heard that in this conversation, so that would be my question. Because that's not in our jurisdiction, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Olson, would you like to come up, or anyone from OHI? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Dennis Olson. I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Office of Higher Education.
Chair Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this is unfair to ask you, Commissioner Olson, as you're the OHI commissioner, but we did see the fiscal note for this particular provision in totality, and because of it's a P20 partnership, it looks like there's a fiscal cost to Children, Youth, and Families Agency, which I know that you're not the commissioner of, but it was $60,000 immediately in the first year, and then every year after that was $58,000, which means it's a half of an FTE. And I don't know if you've had conversations with your colleagues in that agency to know, would they absorb that cost? I I don't think we have an agreement to pay for that cost. I'm just wondering if you have any insights for us.
Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Rarick, to your question, no, I have not had any conversations regarding that fiscal note or with colleagues. I do know we, Office of Higher Education, indicated no costs to participate, as did the P20 partnership as well. That's all I'm aware of. I do know DCYF is a newer partner in the P20 partnership. I do know there are some new reporting requirements, but it's essentially a contribution to a report that we compile at the Office of Higher Education. It's the one we publish annually on the attainment goal. I can't speak to anything much further than that, but I do know that we, if we would have had costs represented, they would have been absorbed because it is the work we do and all the partners contribute to.
Chair Rarick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in light of that, and unless anyone on the Senate side, since this is a Senate provision, has any information from that agency or that jurisdiction of committees, I think it would be prudent for us to possibly divide that portion and remove that so that we don't encumber another agency's costs that we don't have jurisdiction over. And so I can tell you where that is in the side-by-side. It's in the Senate version. Senate side is 3.16 through 3.27. So again, 3.16 through 3.27 would be the language that would be outside of our jurisdiction and encumbering a cost to a state agency that we don't have jurisdiction over. And then also 3.1, excuse me, yeah, 3.2. 3.1 through 3.3. So Mr. Hopkins has the exact citations that pertain specifically to Children, Youth, and Families Agency. But I would recommend that we remove that just so that we don't encumber that to another state agency.
Thank you, Chair Rarick. Senator Umuva-Bin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. I see the Department of Children, Youth, and Families listed on lines 3.2 to 3.3. Can you explain where they appear in lines 3.16 through 3.27?
Chair Rarick.
And where the cost would be in that section?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and that's the portion that they would be participating in the P20 partnership, but I could turn it over to Mr. Hopkins for more detail about that section. Again, or maybe the Senate Council because it is a Senate provision.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at, Senate lines 2.12 through 3.27 comprise the entire higher education attainment goal section. If the question is, where is the P20 partnership mentioned? It's, or DC, oh, sorry, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, where they mentioned. I believe they're mentioned on lines 3.2 at the end of that line and then through the beginning of 3.3. And I don't believe they're mentioned elsewhere in this overall section.
Senator Umuva-Bin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate council weighing in. I guess I would, if the concern is the fiscal note from DCYF, suggest that we strike them on lines 3.2 and 3.3. I would be hesitant to remove the implementation and coordination section, which we're tasking the Minnesota P20 partnership to do, and they have said there's no cost to them. Does that make sense?
Chair Rarick.
Thank you. I'm wondering if Senate Fiscal could actually speak to that, because I think it intertwines with the fiscal note, and maybe Mr. Savory might have the fiscal note and the impacts as well, that we can really tease out exactly where the fiscal cost is. And my concern is just that we don't encumber another state agency that we don't have jurisdiction over.
Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry, that was my exact question as well. I'm just kind of curious where the cost to DCYF is coming from.
Ms. Burr.
Mr. Chair, DCYF in the fiscal note has several assumptions. One, that they would be needing to update their reporting process in their early childhood longitudinal data system, and there would be a $15,000 initial cost to do that reporting and the programming for that, and then a 1.5 FTE to continue to do the reporting for that. They also had some administrative costs related to the upfront hiring for that. So my understanding is that it's kind of looks at the comprehensive update to the bill itself, because they're also mentioning collaborative stakeholder work in their assumptions. So it's largely about the reporting, but there is language that indicates it might be a little bit broader than that.
Chair Rarick.
Yeah, thank you. So that was my concern as well, is I think this expansion beyond just the initial, so for 10 years we've had the attainment goal, and if we continue with the language as it exists and just continue to do the attainment goals and allow OHE to do what OHE has always done and not do the expansion, I don't think we'll encumber any costs. That's why I initially said that the bigger section of the P20 partnership and all of that encompassing, because it is very intertwined in the fiscal note. That would be my concern, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Rarick. Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm wondering in that same vein about the language beginning on lines 2.18 through 2.20. The sub-goals for educational benchmarks, et cetera, if that is a piece that we may need to consider as well.
Senator Umar-Verbitten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess all that I can offer at this point is the best solution I can come forward with is to strike the Department of Children, Youth, and Families on lines 3.2 through 3.3. I'm seeing the rest of this as being a task for the Office of Higher Education and Minnesota P20 partnership that is not projecting any cost and would allow us to continue the goal. But if someone has another suggestion, I'm open to that.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for scrambling here. I'm trying to reach a couple of folks who may be able to offer some insight. Commissioner Brown from DCYF has been in contact with staff and has indicated they would be willing to absorb the costs. So similarly to OHE's representation and P20's representation in the fiscal note.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Any other comments or questions from members? Does that satisfy the situation, Chair Rarick?
Yes and no. So, so Children, Youth, and Families obviously is a newly stood up state agency. We are facing an election where all of us are up for election, all the constitutional officers, the governor, lieutenant governor, House and Senate. And so it's unknown, whose administration will be coming next. And while it's comforting to know that this commissioner says they could absorb the cost, I'm not sure that the next commissioner will feel the same. I have a different view of OHE because it's work that they have done and have continued to do, and that is the core of what they are and what they do. So I don't have concern with continuing with the attainment goal with the work that they do, but it's the expansion that I have concern about. So I would say I still have concern just because of where we find ourselves in the timeline of elections and administrations.
Senator Umar
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to decide if we bring to a vote the current language or language with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families stricken. Because we have heard that they're able to absorb the cost, but I also hear the concern, so I feel like the solution is just to strike them from the language.
Okay.
So I suppose I would just move the A15 amendment with the addition of striking the Department of on lines 3.2, Children, Youth, and Families on lines 3.3.
So you're moving the oral amendment to the underlying Senate language as amended by the A15. Okay. Does everyone follow that so far? So Senator Umar moves to adopt the oral amendment with the Senate language on lines 212 through 3.27 as amended by the A15. The oral amendment being striking the mentioned language. The
Discussion.
Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Chair Rarick.
Just discussion. Yes, thank you. I would like the Senate Council to weigh in also before we vote on that. And then I agree with Representative Coulter that there's concerns with the expansion also, the portion he mentioned, which I believe was 2.18 through 2.20, because that's a jurisdiction that's beyond what OHE would typically do, and it kind of lands back in, it's the work of Children, Youth, and Families, just not naming them. So I'd love to have Senate Council weigh in on that before we vote, because I think that still there are some problematic pieces in here if we're not going to encumber costs to the state agency.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might ask my colleague, Ms. Byrd, to describe a little bit more of that, if she would be able, if you could recognize her.
Ms. Byrd.
Mr. Chair, I don't know for sure, but my reading of the fiscal note was that the largest cost had to do with reporting and that there was additional collaboration that was assumed because of that reporting. So, whether the other sections that don't mention the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, whether there's still involvement, perhaps Mr. Hunter could speak to this, but if they're not named, I don't think that would be they would be forced to participate. That might be a more optional participation, given that they're not named in the statute.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe just to help provide a little advice on this. So, DCYF's part in all of this, in particular, was to potentially provide data on what the sub-goals related to early childhood educational benchmarks would ultimately be. Same thing for MDE in terms of establishing or developing those benchmarks for K through 12 jurisdiction. None of those have been established yet. That's the initial stakeholder work of what we're proposing to do here. And so I believe what you had referenced, Ms. Byrd, was the potential for new reporting through research questions to the Early Childhood Longitudinal Data System, ECLDS. We don't yet know what those may be, and so there is an unknown whether there would be additional reports required, or likely that data already exists within ECLDS. I am on, we're one of the participating agencies in both ECLDS and SLEDS. Likely this data already exists, and so, again, I'm not going to speak for DCYF, but none of this has been established yet. That is the work yet to be done. That's instructed through the statute language in front of us here. So I can't say for sure, but I would hope we would at least keep, if we end up moving to, or if you all end up moving to strike DCYF, that we at least keep or retain early childhood and K through 12, so we can at least work with them on a partnership basis, whether it's formalized here or not, to incorporate that work and that data.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Discussion? Representative Rarick. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate the idea. I have to say, I think relatively new to the committee, this is not really a good use of time. Like, we need to focus on the attainment goals that have already been set out that we have not yet achieved for higher ed. And incorporating the P20 thing, I know I'm new to this. I've not served on education committees before. But we have to get K-12 system to focus on basic reading, math, and science, where they are already not meeting their own K-12 benchmarks. So to start saying, what is the pre-K and K-5 benchmarks so that they can meet their post K-12 goals, just seems like we're creating a lot of bureaucrats and a lot of meetings and a lot of stuff, when really we need them to focus on achievement in their original jurisdiction of K-12. And we have not achieved that. We have not achieved the higher ed attainment goals. So I'm not sure creating another working group that is identifying sub-goals for critical benchmarks in early childhood and in K-12 that assist in reaching the higher ed attainment goals. I'm not sure why we need to do that when we need to get the very basics done in making sure that our youngest learners are meeting their math, science, and reading goals before we even think about this. So I have just great concerns about doing this when both systems need to be focused on getting achievement up in their own jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Robbins, for those comments. And also thank you for acknowledging that you're new to the space of education, because that's what education already does. What you're talking about, focusing on reading and writing, those kinds of things, that's what people are focusing on in sort of pre-K through 12 education now already. And that is intimately and profoundly necessary for success in higher education. So articulating some of these goals to each other and even aligning curricula is extremely important for how education itself has worked, is working, and is going to need to work in the future. So I'm not making a point about this specific provision in front of us, more generally about how education works.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Senator Putnam, and I appreciate that. I would say that we know that they need to have basic grade level reading, writing, math, and science to have be able to make the attainment goals when they get to higher ed. I think we already all know that. All Minnesotans know that. I don't know that we need some big partnership and some big bunch of meetings to further make that point. We need the work done so that kids are focused on achievement, and that when we have 50% of our kids not reading at grade level in K-12, 55% not meeting the math grade achievements, and 60% not doing science at grade level, we need to help them focus on that. And if they meet those benchmarks, they will be able to make it in the post-secondary world. So I'm concerned about creating a whole new partnership that takes a lot of time and effort when really people just need to focus on basic achievement. Thank you.
Senator Umar Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, the Minnesota P20 partnership is in existence. This is their work. We had a previous attainment goal that expired in 2025. They worked with the stakeholders, which is their job, to figure out why didn't we meet that attainment goal. One of the key recommendations was to have those sub-goals to help us meet the higher education attainment goal. We need to break that down in order to understand why we're not meeting that. And they've also added those additional pieces beyond looking at the racial disparities, looking at regions, looking at some of the economic factors, and again, really focusing on meeting some earlier benchmarks. So I would really like to just take this to a vote. I'm, again, willing to strike the Department of Children, Youth, and Families from the reporting section, just to make it clear that this is the work of the Office of Higher Education and Minnesota P20 partnership, which has said there's not a cost, but I would just like to move to a vote on that language.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Umar Bain. Representative Coulter.
Yes, I'll be very short, Mr. Chair. I hate to jump in after the author of the amendment here, but since I was the one, excuse me, who asked the question in the first place, I am satisfied by the explanation that we got from Senate nonpartisan staff. That's not really where the cost was in this language. At the risk of sort of jumping into a more charged debate, as the only one here who serves on the Children and Families Committee, I would remind folks that 80% of brain development happens by age 3, 90% happens by age 5. So if we're talking about attainment goals and we're talking about, you know, making sure that kids are getting off to a great start, that we absolutely do need to look at early childhood in K through 12. I think, you know, I think the change that Senator Umu Verbatim has proposed here is the right one, and I think we should support that one.
Thank you so much, and I think we're just going to move to the vote. So Senator Umar Rabin moves to adopt the Senate language on lines 2.12 through 3.27 as amended by the A15 and as amended by the oral amendment. Is everyone clear on that? Awesome. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just, if I could suggest, in addition to the oral amendment, to direct the reviser, or just to change every instance of where 75 appears between 3.7 and 3.15 of the Senate language, to make sure that the intent of the A15 would ensure that every instance of the word 75 is either changed to 70, or the language of that, if it's already says 70 and it's stricken, to have that reinstated and to delete 75 where appropriate. So just to direct the reviser to make those revisions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Is everyone okay with that? Awesome. So we'll move that and include the intent outlined by Mr. Hunter as well, and I directed the revisers as well. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is adopted. Not adopted, sorry. I thought one of them said yes. And so, what's the next one? Back to the A12. Senator Umar Bain moves to adopt the Senate language on lines 4.14 through 7.9 as amended by the A12. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry.
It's the underlying Senate position. It's the underlying Senate position. Awesome. Any other discussion? Okay.
Mr. Chair, can you repeat your motion?
Yes. Senator Umar Bain moves to adopt the underlying Senate language on lines 4.14 through 7.9 as amended by the A12. Is there any discussion? Okay, good. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Senator Umar Rabin, you want to go on to the Regents discussion?
Mr. Chair, I believe we would be in favor of our Senate language.
Senator Umar Rabin moves to adopt the...
Maybe we can have council point to where that is.
Yep, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, could Senator Umu Verbatim repeat?
I believe it's on 39.12 through 39.18. It's the Senate-only language for the Regents process, the Regents appointment.
Oh, page 39, I see. One moment, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so members, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we're looking at a page R42 of the side-by-side on Senate side 39.12, and Senator Umar Verbatim, is it your, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, is it the intent to offer the A20 amendment? Oh, you're just
The
moving
intent is to
oh, I'm
move the
sorry.
Senate position.
Okay. Yes, so members, what we're looking at is just page R42, 39.12, governor appointments.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Senator Umar Bain moves to adopt the Senate-only position as outlined by Mr. Hunter. Is there any discussion? Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. And I am, at this point, I think we just need to have a much broader conversation about the entire process of how University of Minnesota Regents become University of Minnesota Regents. And Senator Umar-Brayton and I have already had some conversations on that, and House members may recall when I somewhat awkwardly engaged Representative Allen in that conversation in committee. And so I am committed to having that conversation, but I think it needs to be a sort of beginning to end look at that overall process. And so at this point, I am just not comfortable supporting this language and would ask folks to vote no.
Are there any other comments or questions from members? Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I completely respect Representative Coulter's, I almost gave you a demotion there, Representative Coulter's point of view on this issue, because I also agree. I think the process as a whole is kind of screwed up, and this is just one plank of the process that needs to be fixed. But that being said, you always take one more step before you get to the end of the journey, which is why I'm not in opposition to this proposal at all, because this is something that any eventual larger conversation would have to address as well. And so for that reason, I would support the Senate position. But I understand completely where you're coming from, Representative Coulter. I think that the process is way too goofy right now. But this is one of the goofs that's got to be fixed.
And, Senator Umar-Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate all the conversations with Representative Coulter. I do think there's more work that we need to do. I was under the impression that the House may be bringing some amendments to our language, but just wanted to be clear where we stand. We would support our Senate position. If we're going to be taking up other amendments, I feel like this would be the time. So, waiting to hear.
Thank you so much, Senator Umar-Bain. I also want to support the Senate position. I also was frustrated and upset with what went on last year and the way the regents were appointed. I believe that if there are candidates that work hard and go through the process, meeting with representatives and senators, going through the RCAC process, and to have the governor appoint folks that did not go through that process, to me, is not fair. I would prefer to I'd prefer to support this language in which would prevent that. I'm happy to also have continued conversations around, within this committee, around maybe some language to gain more support from committee members, but I would hope that we don't conclude without moving something. But with that, I can move to Representative Robbins or Chair Rarick. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the Senate's position. I also thought how things were handled last year was terrible, but I prefer the language we'll be discussing in the amendment, so I will not support the Senate language.
Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the Senate language, but it's not complete. And so we've really thought a lot about this. We felt like also that the rug was pulled out from under us. We went through all this work. And in my family, my senator husband actually is on the RCAC committee, so he really put in the time and effort. to then have the governor pick two people that none of us had heard of, that didn't go through RCAC, that didn't come through the legislative joint committee. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do the joint convention. We were close. Senator Fateh and I signed the letter, and we were really close to doing that. And I'm very sad that we couldn't. It's only been, that's happened only 3 times in 30 years, so it's very rare. But the part that's missing, and I do appreciate your language, but the part that's missing is in the rare, I don't know if it's ever happened this way, instance that the joint legislative committee doesn't meet, then what? So then, so if somebody, which has happened where a regent passes away and the governor then appoints, I would like at least that appointment to come through RCAC. And so the amendment that we have is getting to that, like, if we aren't currently in session and we haven't had a joint legislative committee to put people forward, and then the governor still gets to pick when we haven't gone through that process in the case of someone that's passed, which, like I said, has happened, then at least in that instance, the governor would have to turn to the RCAC and the body of people that RCAC had worked through and processed through. And also in our amendment, it talks about the fact that the work of the RCAC and the work of the Joint Legislative Committee is in effect for the whole 2 years or the biennium that the legislature is the legislature. And so there wouldn't be a gap anymore. And unfortunately, there is a gap right now, and the governor can really appoint anybody he wants. And so our amendment is getting at the gap and the situation where, in the rare situation that maybe the Joint Legislative Committee doesn't actually have an opportunity to meet. I don't know in history if that's ever happened, but you know what? Just in case it does, because stranger things have happened. So our amendment, the A30, would get at those 3 different scenarios where someone passes and the governor still has to pick somebody that either came through the Joint Legislative Committee or through RCAC. So at least it's had some vetting. So we were hoping to bring something that was really looking at the full scope of what the governor does and how he appoints. So, and that's why the A30.
Thank you so much, Chair Rarick. Is there any discussion on the A30? Senator Murvabain has already moved the Senate position on lines 3912 through 3918. So we'll vote on that first. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. Chair Rarick moves the A30. Is there any discussion on that? Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in addition to the comments that I made previously that I don't need to double back to, I will raise that one particular concern that I and other members within our caucus have is that restricting appointments only to folks recommended by the RCAC may mean that in the admittedly extreme rare situation where this happens, that the governor may only have 2 folks from which to choose. And given the importance of the position of serving on the Board of Regents, we felt that was just far too limited of a field, given the governor's need to make these appointments. So I am going to likewise ask folks to vote against the A30 amendment as well.
Any further discussion? Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure that I heard you correctly, Representative Coulter. Did you say that in the instance where RCAC would only move forward 2 candidates? I'm wondering if that is that what you said?
Representative Coulter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Rarick, I may not have expressed myself completely, but the RCAC can recommend between 2 to 4 candidates per position, correct? So in the instance, if this were to become law and we were to, and that sort of situation were to occur, it is conceivable that the governor may only have a field of 2 possible candidates to choose from. That was the point that I was making.
Thank you, Representative Coulter. Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way that the amendment is written is that when RCAC meets and they go through their 30, however many applications, and they kind of bring it, boil it down. In most bienniums, I can't think of a biennium that was different, and maybe I'm not remembering correctly, that there are typically 4 candidates that they are looking to, positions that they're looking to fill. That's sort of how the whole cycle goes through, because you're on for 6 years, and they kind of cycle through. So I'm talking about when they do their initial work and they move forward, it would be either 8 or possibly 16, because you're talking about 4 open positions, that they would bring it down to that, and then those, either 8 or 16, would move forward, and that would be the pool by which, if the Legislative Joint Committee doesn't meet, the governor would be able to pick from. So it would never be an instance where it would only be 2, because just by the nature of how the RCAC appointments are done throughout all of history, and so it's, there wouldn't be an instance of just 2. It would always have at least 8.
Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Rarick, for that explanation of your intent. That is not how I read your amendment. And when the RCAC makes recommendations, they do so for specific positions, right? Like they will recommend, a candidate for the 3rd Congressional District, for example, or for an at-large seat, for example. And so the way I read your amendment is that the governor may only appoint someone for that position from the pool of candidates that the RCAC would recommend for that position. And so that would potentially restrict the field in my view, which I guess also sort of proves a point that perhaps this language needs a little bit more work before I'd be comfortable supporting it.
Thank you, Representative Coulter. Are there any further discussion? Senator Umar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate that we supported our Senate position, so I can't support the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Umar. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. We're now going to go to lines 2.2 through 2.11. Senator Putnam moves the Senate-only position around the paid blood donation. That's on R1. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Representative Robbins?
I'm sorry, I was looking at something else. Is this regarding the R1? Yes. I'm sorry, I'm fine to accept it.
Thank you so much, Representative Robbins. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Thank you. Representative Walgamot moves the Senate-only position around the athletic fees on lines 3.28 through 3.32. Oh, sorry. Senator Putnam. You move it. And I believe we have Mr. Oman here that would like to speak to the amendment, if he's here. We have the A21 that clarifies some concerns around Mr. Ullman's comments, and so Mr. Hunter will be passing out the A21. We have a member that stepped up momentarily, so due to quorum, we will take a brief recess. For waiting while we got that sorted out. We formed the amendment A16 yesterday around Senator Abler's intent, but we had conversations with Mr. Ullman around how we can clarify it so that it doesn't apply to Min-State, which has the facilities used by all students. I want to bring up Mr. Ullman before we bring the A21 forward. Mr. Ullman. Thank you.
Chair Fateh, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Bernie Ullman of Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. Appreciate the language. When we saw the amendment posted a few hours ago, we started having conversations about how does this affect us. And while, when I testified yesterday on it, obviously we're not engaged in a lot of the NIL work, but for facilities, we just want to have it clarified that use of recreational space that students have a fee or they vote for a fee most of the time would be not part of the language. So the bottom line is if the general population of the student body has access, we would view that differently than, quote, an athletic facility. And it was just a matter of getting clarification, and this amendment does that. So for example, you might have a campus that has a football stadium that was fundraised for or what has been there for many years. The students might come forward and say, look, we'll put a referendum or we'll vote for a fee that'll put a bubble on that, so they'll have year-round use of that recreational space. So ours is more of the general space that's available for students, and that's all the clarification we would need.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ullman. Are there any questions for Mr. Ullman? Seeing none, Senator Putnam moves the A21 amendment. Any discussion? And the underlying Senate position, I apologize. Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this amendment still affect the University of Minnesota? And if so, can they come and testify as to this change?
Yes, absolutely. Is there any member from the U of M that would like to come up? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erin Sexton with the University of Minnesota. We just saw this language, so I think we're working to understand the overall impact. Most of our athletic facilities do have a general use and purpose. If you think of Huntington Bank, we host career fairs, we host commencements, we host, my son's football team plays intramural football at Huntington Bank Stadium. So most are general use. My understanding is this would not cover those types of facilities, but it does sound, like facilities, maybe our Athletes Village, for instance, that are used by our student athletes, that this would cover, if I'm understanding that correctly. What I would say is, you know, it's important as we look at how we keep our athletics sustainable over time. We do have a student fee that is used to maintain our athletic facilities. It isn't a student facilities fee. And we do impose that because most of our facilities are general use and accessible by our student body. And so that is a tool that we put into place last year and we feel is important to be able to maintain. So just want to make sure we're understanding the implications of this.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is always a perennial question. What authority, do we feel like the legislature would have authority over the University of Minnesota in regards to this specific issue?
Ms. Sexton.
I am not probably the best person to answer that, Mr. Chair and Chair Rarick. I think what the language does is suggest to us that we wouldn't impose a fee on facilities that are not general use. I think if you're suggesting that, that is fully within the purview of the legislature and would defer to all of you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Mr. Will Luther, would you like to come up? Please introduce yourself for the record and you may begin.
Thank you, members. My name is William Luther. I am the Director of State Affairs for the Undergrad Student Government at the University of Minnesota. We support the new language. You know, our facilities are, you know, students do use facilities. So for example, students do interact with facilities even if they don't go to any games. So for example, convocation, commencement are usually done at the stadiums. So we would be fine if on line 1.9, for recreation is stricken, and so it would read solely or primarily by the general student body. In terms of the fee, I know that the university, you know, says that the fee was in place that, you know, in the Star Tribune and also in other places, the university said, you know, students majority use these facilities. What we're really aiming at and what students are really displeased about is that a $200 athletic fee was put on us without any consultation of the student body during the June Board of Regents meeting. But we would, again, we would like to say that 1.9 for recreation be stricken so that those funds could be used for Mariucci, Huntington Bank that are used for career fairs, convocation, graduation. But that wouldn't apply would be the facilities such as in Athletes Village, as the previous testifier said, such as the Nagurski complex and other stuff that primarily is restricted only for student athletes. So we would, that's what we would like to see the language as.
Thank you so much. Is there any questions for Mr. Luther? So, Mr. Hunter, have you captured what? Oh, sorry. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Luther. There's no further questions? So, Senator Putnam moves that the Senate-only position, lines 3.28 through 3.32, as amended by the A21, be adopted. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Next up, we have R42, the prohibition on curriculum control. We have the Senate-only position, lines 3919 through 3925. Is there any discussion? Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not my provision. I was asked to discuss it a little bit by Senator Mann, who is the person who is behind this. And this is a response to a very specific occurrence, but it's one that speaks to potential future problems. And that was specifically about insurance companies partnering with medical schools and shaping the curriculum of that medical school to the benefit of the insurance company and the detriment of the students. And so that's basically, this did happen when United Health Group had a class in concert with the U. And it was supposed to be a collaborative course between the insurance company and the medical school. But unfortunately, some of the curriculum they introduced was actually more sort of advertisements for United Health Group. And that was the concern that arose from this specific circumstance. Students and medical board members who testified before the Senate Higher Education Committee asserted that the course was, quote, United Health Group propaganda, unquote. And the insurer's proprietary financial models were presented as absolute medical standards, despite false claims which were later fact-checked by students. One thing that should give us pride and some hope is that the students realized that things weren't going right, and they themselves investigated and checked it. I've been assured that this is not a widespread problem. This was a specific instance that occurred once, but it is something that could happen in the future, and thus the rationale for this legislation.
Thank you so much, Senator Putnam. Are there any questions from members? Chair Rarick.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the University of Minnesota, if we have somebody from medical school might be here to speak to this, and if this would impact their work.
Yes, I see someone coming down. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. Andrew Chelseth with the Government Relations Team at the University of Minnesota. Not with the medical school, my apologies, Representative Rarick. Is there a specific question you would like addressed with my liberal arts knowledge of medical schools?
Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chelseth. So I was just wondering, if we were to enact this, how would this impact the medical school's ability to do their work? So we're basically saying anybody that's a for-profit entity could no longer partner with the University of Minnesota Medical School. That seems to me to be a pretty big impact, but I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were about that.
Mr. Chelseth.
Mr. Chair, Representative Rarick, I would first start off by saying the university is neutral in this position and has expressed that to Senator Mann. Curriculum of courses at the medical school is still developed and taught by U of M faculty in the appropriate committees. So it's something that we would continue to do. So I don't think they would have an issue doing their work in the future if something like this were put into place.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So my concern about this is that this seems like it was a one-time situation that has been largely addressed already. So to put in statute that we prohibit them from developing, managing, or otherwise controlling, perhaps controlling, but to not allow a for-profit company to be involved in even developing or managing curriculum just seems like a bridge too far. So I will be a no on this.
Any other members? Thank you so much for your testimony. So Senator Putnam moves the Senate-only position on line 3919 through 3925. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is not adopted. We can also take the vote, since it's related, on the next one also, around the medical school curriculum reporting. Senator Umar moves lines 3926 through 40.5 of the Senate-only position. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Oh, the amendment is adopted. Oh, you have an amendment? Okay, so first, Senator Putnam is going to move the Senate-only position on lines 7.23 through 7.27. This was Senator Duckworth's, but he's presenting a bill on the floor right now. He cannot be here, so I'll pass it off to Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This amendment is very simple. It just strikes 2023 and inserts 2025, and the effect of it is just to give schools additional flexibility and stability so they can manage their online education programs with existing vendor relationships.
Thank you. What amendment number was that, Representative Robbins?
I'm sorry, it's the A32.
A32. Any discussion? Representative Coulter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of an awkward place because I'm going to ask folks to vote against the underlying language anyway. So part of me says, what difference does it really make? But again, I've spent a lot of time working on online program managers and their relationships with schools that they contract with. Our purpose in passing the legislation when we did was to understand that folks have existing contracts and that we didn't necessarily want to cause too much chaos by adopting the regulations that we did. But the purpose at that time was to allow those contracts to sort of continue. It's now been 2 years since the language was passed and enacted. So I will say that I just don't think this amendment is particularly necessary, given that, the purpose of passing the regulations in the first place.
Senator Putnam.
Representative Robbins, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you clarify? I don't have the full language in front of me, and that's my fault. How does this change in date relate to R6, which also adjusts the exemptions and dates for OPMs?
Representative Robbins.
It strikes 2023 and inserts 2025, so it just gives 2 years of additional time.
Senator Putnam.
Could Councilor someone explain to me, the R6 is a very similar provision, and I don't know what the date is on that, and I don't have that in front of me.
Sorry, Senator Putnam, the date on the R6 is July 1st, 2023, and I believe Representative Robbins is amending it to July 1st, 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again for my own clarity, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit slow. That exemption extends into contracts for companies for when they were made, and this is about operationalizing future connections. Is that correct?
Representative Robbins.
I'm sorry, could you say the question again? I was reading something.
No, that's fine, and I'm still just trying to figure this out. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it looks like Representative Coulter might be able to explain this to me too, but what my understanding is that the Senate position, it extends some of the OPM arrangements that were signed before 2023. Mm-hmm. And what you're proposing allows new negotiations and new agreements up until 2025? Okay, thank you.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, so it just gives the institutions more flexibility for relationships and contracts that have been enacted up to 2025. So it just builds in additional flexibility, and I think that's advisable. Some of these are very long-term relationships, and so I think that will ensure that these contracts are managed without disruption and that are not adverse to the institution or to the students.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Representative Robbins, but again, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but it sounds like you're enabling new contracts to be signed until 2025, which would have nothing to do with the duration of long-term relationships. Am I misunderstanding that?
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. Senator Putnam, I believe it's contracts entered into on or before July 1st, 2025. So it would just encapsulate up to that period, which is 2 years longer than the previous period.
Sure.
But it's not new it's new to when the original language was passed, but not new to this current time period we're in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Robbins. Yes, that's helpful. This is clear to me now. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to first vote on the underlying R6, the Senate only position. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? With a 2-0, it's not adopted.
Sorry, yeah, Mr. Chair, sorry, procedural question. Don't we have to vote on the amendment first and then the
I thought we
underlying?
were doing the, it was the A32, is that correct? Okay. So Representative Robbins moves the A32 amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
The amendment is not adopted. Now we're going to the underlying amendment, underlying language, the R6, lines 7.23 through 7.27, which is the Senate language for OPMs. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The amendment is not adopted. We'll now be going to the technical recommendations. Commissioner Olson, would you like to come up to speak on that? Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, for the record, Dennis Olson. I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. And because I did such a bang-up job yesterday walking through all of this, figured may need a co-pilot today. So also have Andrew Wold, our General Counsel, Director of Compliance, and oversight of our Licensing and Registration Division here with me as well.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Andrew Wold, Minnesota Office of Higher Education, General Counsel and Director of Compliance.
Mr. Hunter, so I just wanted to clarify one thing. So we can accomplish the changes by not adopting R27, 31, and 32? Is that correct, Mr. Hunter?
Thank you.
We can accomplish the recommendations in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So my understanding is that the Office of Higher Education did some review, and it's their request that certain, the language on R27, which in the summary document is a Senate-only position, and then on R31 and R32, which is House only and then Senate only, that their request is that we not include any of those pieces in the final committee report, so to essentially take no action on them. So perhaps it's still worth just some explanation from them as to why they believe that. And if I got any of that wrong, hopefully Mr. Hopkins could add any clarification, but it looks like he gave me a thumbs up. So that would be my explanation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter and Commissioner Olson. So we can accomplish your recommendations by not adopting this language. That's correct? Sounds good?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes. I see Representative Coulter motioning.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Representative Coulter.
You're good. No, thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I just noticed in the document that we have that, you see at the bottom, it says the office does recommend adoption of the House language with specific concerns for lines 30.7 through 30.15. So just wanted to catch that because that is something that OHE recommends.
Yeah.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Mr. Hunter's point, maybe it may be just easiest for us to quickly walk through starting on R27 and go through the 3 or 4 pieces and where we lie, just to be crystal clear.
Yes, Mr. Olson.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Olson.
And I'll hand it to Mr. Wold to do that.
Mr. Wold, welcome.
Thank you. One moment, I'm trying to get back to the right page. R27. This had an addition in the Senate language around the review required at the end of each year on fees collected for private career schools, also removing the term non-refundable. This is welcome but not necessary amendment to the statute, as there's already a consideration that needs to be taken every year when we go through our budget to ensure that we are meeting the prior language in that same subdivision around collecting fees that are sufficient to recover but not exceed the administrative costs of the office. The R31 has public information section that is redundant in consideration of what was already adopted yesterday around financial records, student complaint data, and accreditation reports and records. Those redundancies, for financial records and accreditation records and reports were adopted yesterday. The redundancy for student complaints is in Minnesota Statute 136A.8295, subdivision 7. So that already exists with regard to student complaint data. The reason for those redundancies as passed in the House were because I didn't catch those until I was speaking with the Senate, who came around, when I spoke with Mr. Hunter later on, and Ms. Byrd, recognized that those had already been addressed. So there is no need to adopt that language. The R32, similar to R17 and R27, address fees for renewals and include a strikeout of non-refundable. For similar reason, we do not need to have those adopted because we already have the obligation to collect fees that do not exceed the administrative cost of the unit. There is language in 30.7 to 30.15. I believe that was already adopted in same or similar below. I'm sorry, where was that? Around the financial documentation, just below that in the same page on R32 as same language between the Senate and the House. So I don't think that we actually need to go through that because it's already been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Wold. Any final comments or questions from members? Seeing none, and so we will not be taking action since we don't have to, so I want to thank both of you for coming up. Are there any final amendments from members? Chair Rarick.
Mr. Chair, not an amendment exactly, but if we return back to the attainment goals, I think that we would be agreeable to just extend the deadline that was in the underlying language and not all the other encompassing things, just because it seems it's a little confusing to add in other state agencies when they're not here in our jurisdiction. So we would be fine with just extending it to 2040 if the committee would be so agreeable.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that's something, we could potentially land on. It's unfortunate because the opportunity really lied in all of the language that was presented. The partnerships that currently exist, memorializing really the interagency work that we do already with DCYF, P20 partnership, MDE, DEED, and others. It would have been nice to have that framework there. We'll continue to do the work regardless. I don't know how much extending the date really does for us without building in the opportunity for the framework. So I will just share with members that I'm disappointed if we don't have the full encompassing recommended language.
Senator Umar Rabin.
Trying to reach over to the mic, it's a little bit more difficult now. So hopefully you can hear me. Thank you. I think there's a lot of work that went into developing the attainment goal that was before us. And I understand that there's concerns, questions people have. I think at this point, it would make sense to continue to work on that next year. I just think we had a really well thought out attainment goal before us. And if we need to continue to do work with additional stakeholders and legislators on that, I'm certainly committed to it. But that would be my preference.
Thank you so much. And I'd also have the preference of working on it next year with you, Senator Morbain, and the other members as well. And thank you so much for sharing your testimony, Commissioner Olson and Mr. Wold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you so much. Any final comments, questions, amendments? Seeing none. I'll move to adopt the conference report and direct staff and the revisor to make the technical and conforming changes as well. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The report is adopted. Members, please watch for an email from the revisor to approve the committee report electronically by replying to the email. And we were directed to finish by 4 p.m., so let the record show that we did hit a buzzer beater. It is, it's a 3:58, so. And before we adjourn, I want to say thank you all so much for having this robust discussion. I want to thank our House counterparts also. I know Chair Rarick really values having conversations out in the open, so I appreciate the transparency and I appreciate the openness and having these good discussions. And I also want to thank the staff that really worked hard on both the House and Senate side that really did the behind-the-scenes work to make this possible. So any final words from any members before we conclude? Chair Rarick?
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you for the open transparency. We've done everything in front of the public so they can hear it, as mundane as it may be. But nonetheless, I think that this is something that we should do more of and not less of, is be very transparent and public. And so I appreciate that we did it this way. Thank you.